Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again with your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's see what tonight's tale brings us. The Lookout. Jesse Crow had been running from fire for 2 years, and he figured the best place to hide was somewhere he could see it coming. The Forest Service posting had seemed perfect when he applied. Fire Lookout, Shoshone National Forest, May through September, 15 miles from the nearest road. 60 feet up in a glass box on top of the world. No crew, no partners, no one depending on him to make the right call when everything went wrong. Just him, the mountains, and all that silence. He'd been a smoke jumper once, one of the best, or at least that's what they'd said in the articles after the Blacktail fire, after 7 members of his crew went into a canyon that became a chimney. After Jesse made a call that saved his own life and ended theirs, he'd told them to head west while he went east to scout. He'd told them the fire was moving north. He'd been wrong about everything. The investigation cleared him. The official report said he'd followed protocol, that there was nothing he could have done differently, that the fire's behavior was unpredictable and the tragedy was unavoidable. The fire had created its own weather system, a phenomenon called a fire whirl, and the canyon had become a convection oven in less than 90 seconds. 7 people, 90 seconds. The investigation didn't have to live with the screaming, with the memory of their voices on the radio, calling for help that couldn't reach them, cursing him and God and the fire itself until the heat melted their transmitters and the channel went dead. The helicopter dropped him at Elk Ridge Tower on a Tuesday morning in late May, the pilot giving him that look people always gave when they found out someone was doing a solo lookout stint. Part respect, part concern, part better you than me. Buddy, the look got worse when they found out he used to jump that he traded adrenaline and teamwork and the brotherhood of the fire line for complete and total isolation. Jesse just grabbed his pack and his box of supplies and watched the chopper disappear over the western ridge until the sound of rotors faded into the wind and the silence rushed in to fill the space they left behind. Then it was quiet. Really quiet. The kind of quiet that city people thought they understood but didn't. Not silence like the absence of noise, silence like a presence. Like the mountains were holding their breath, watching to see what this new human would do, whether he'd last, whether he'd break like so many others had broken before him, whether the solitude would heal him or finish the job the fire had started. The tower was exactly what he'd expected from the photographs in his orientation packet. 60 feet of wooden stairs switchbacking up to a 14 by 14 cab with windows on all sides. A cot in one corner covered with a sleeping bag that had been used by dozens of lookouts before him. A propane stove for cooking. A desk with the Osborne Firefinder mounted in the center like some ancient navigational instrument, a metal disc with crosshairs and degree markings that let you pinpoint the exact location of a smoke column with military precision. Radio equipment that looked older than Jesse was. Logbooks going back to 1952, filled with the handwriting of dozens of lookouts who'd spent their summers in this exact spot, watching the same ridgelines, recording the same weather patterns, fighting the same loneliness. A pair of binoculars that had seen better decades, the rubber grip worn smooth by generations of hands. Home for the next 4 months. Jesse spent the first 3 days getting settled, learning the topography through the big windows, matching what he saw to the maps tacked on the walls, memorizing ridgelines and drainage patterns, the places where fires liked to start and the valleys they'd funnel through if they did, testing the radio equipment, checking in with dispatch twice a day like the protocol demanded. Elk Ridge, this is dispatch, radio check. Dispatch, Elk Ridge. Loud and clear. No smoke, no activity. Copy that, Elk Ridge. Stay cool up there. That was Linda, veteran dispatcher, 23 years in the job, voice like gravel and honey mixed together in a way that was somehow both comforting and no nonsense. She'd warned him about the isolation during his orientation back at the ranger station, told him that the mountains played tricks on people who stayed up there too long, shadows that moved wrong, sounds that didn't have sources, the feeling of being watched by something that wasn't wildlife. Most guys, it hits around week 3, she'd said, pouring coffee into a mug that said world's okayest dispatcher. They start calling in reports that don't make sense. Smoke where there's no smoke, people where there's no people, buildings where there's no buildings. She paused on that last one, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much and learned not to talk about it. Towers where there's no towers. Jesse had smiled and nodded, and not mentioned that he'd spent 2 years being watched by the ghosts of 7 dead smoke jumpers. A few mountain shadows weren't going to break him. He was already broken. On day 4, he saw the other tower. It was just before sunset, the light going golden and soft the way it only did in the high country when he did his evening scan with the binoculars. West Ridge clear, just trees and granite and the distant gleam of snowfields that never quite melted. North Ridge clear, rolling green wilderness as far as the eye could see. East Ridge clear, the land falling away toward valleys that held rivers he'd never visit. South Ridge. He stopped, adjusted the focus, looked again. There, on a peak about 3 miles south, something caught the dying sun and flashed it back at him. A structure, wooden frame, glass windows. The unmistakable silhouette of a fire lookout tower, identical to the one he was standing in, on a ridge where his map showed nothing but wilderness. Jesse lowered the binoculars and checked the map again, ran his finger along the topographical lines, found the peak he'd been looking at. Nothing. No structure marked, no trail leading to it. No indication that anything had ever been built there, just contour lines and the pale green of designated wilderness, where construction had been prohibited for 60 years. He raised the binoculars again. The tower was still there, catching the last of the daylight, looking exactly like his own tower would look from 3 miles away. Same shape, same proportions. Same stairs switchbacking up to a cab that glinted in the sunset. Maybe the map was outdated. Maybe they'd built a new lookout station and hadn't updated the charts yet. It happened sometimes, especially out here where bureaucracy moved slower than glaciers and communication fell through cracks wide enough to lose a building in. Jesse picked up the radio. Dispatch, Elk Ridge. A pause, then Linda's voice. Go ahead, Elk Ridge. Hey Linda, quick question. Is there another lookout station south of my position? Maybe 3 miles out? On that big peak with the granite face? Silence. Then, negative. Elk Ridge. You're the only active lookout in that sector. The nearest station is Timber Creek, and that's 12 miles northeast of you. Why? You sure there's nothing south? Even something decommissioned? Abandoned? An old station that's not staffed anymore? More silence. Longer this time. When Linda came back, her voice was different, careful, the voice of someone choosing her words with precision. Jesse, there's nothing on that ridge. There's never been anything on that ridge. The whole area's designated wilderness. No construction permitted since 1964. No grandfathered structures. Nothing. A pause. You're probably seeing a rock formation catching the light wrong. Happens all the time up there. The altitude plays tricks. Jesse looked through the binoculars again. The tower was still there. He could see the wooden stairs, the windows, the shape of the cab, the distinctive outline of a firefinder mounted on a desk inside. And he could see something else, a shape, a figure, something moving behind the glass. Yeah, he said slowly. Yeah, you're probably right. Rock formation. Sorry to bother you. No bother. Get some sleep, Elk Ridge. First week's always the hardest. Jesse set down the radio and watched the sun finish setting. The tower on the south ridge caught the last rays of light, glowing orange against the darkening sky like a beacon, like a signal fire. Then the darkness came, and the tower disappeared into the black. But just before it vanished completely, Jesse saw something that made his blood go cold. A light, a signal light, flashing from the tower's cab in a pattern he recognized from his smoke jumper training. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. Jesse didn't sleep that night. He sat in his chair with the binoculars in his lap, watching the south ridge, waiting for the light to appear again. It didn't. The ridge stayed dark, just another black shape against the spray of stars that covered the sky from horizon to horizon. No light pollution out here, no civilization to dim the cosmic display. Just the Milky Way arcing overhead and the darkness where the tower had been. By morning, he'd almost convinced himself that Linda was right. Rock formation, trick of the light. Maybe exhaustion from the hike in and the altitude adjustment. He was at nearly 9,000 feet, and the thin air did strange things to your brain chemistry. His mind seeing patterns where there weren't any, filling in shapes that made sense because human brains hated randomness, hated the chaos of nature, needed to impose order even where none existed. The tower wasn't there, except it was. He saw it again at dawn, when the sun crested the eastern peaks and painted everything gold. Same spot, same shape, same wooden stairs and glass windows and that unmistakable silhouette that Jesse had stared at in orientation photographs for hours. He grabbed the binoculars and focused them with shaking hands. The tower was closer. Not by much, maybe a quarter mile, but definitely closer than it had been yesterday. On a different ridge lower, nearer to the valley that separated them, as if it had walked down from its original peak during the night and stopped to rest on the next one over. That wasn't possible. Towers didn't move. Buildings didn't relocate themselves overnight. He was miscalculating the distance, or he'd been looking at the wrong peak yesterday, or the angle of the light had changed how the terrain appeared, or nothing. The tower had moved. The tower had gotten closer, and Jesse was either losing his mind or seeing something that defied every law of physics he'd ever learned. He spent the morning documenting everything. He sketched the view from his south window with a precision that came from years of mapping fire behavior marking the position of the other tower relative to every landmark he could identify. Granite face with the lightning scar, lone ponderosa pine on the eastern slope, dry creek bed cutting through the valley floor, distinctive boulder formation that looked like a sleeping bear. He noted the time, the weather conditions, the exact coordinates from his topographical map. If he was going crazy, at least he'd have records, proof of his own deterioration. Something for the Forest Service to study after they found him wandering the wilderness in his underwear, babbling about towers that moved in the night. At noon, he tried the radio again. Dispatch, Elk Ridge. Go ahead, Elk Ridge. Linda's voice was wary now. She remembered yesterday's conversation. Linda, I need you to check something for me. Historical records. Was there ever a lookout station on the south ridge of my sector? Maybe something that was decommissioned, torn down? Something that might still be on old maps? A long pause. The sound of paper shuffling, a keyboard clicking. Linda was actually checking. That was either a good sign or a very bad one. Elk Ridge, I'm showing no record of any structure ever being built on that ridge. No lookout stations, no ranger cabins, no research installations, nothing. That whole area has been designated wilderness since the Wilderness Act passed in 1964. Before that, it was National Forest. But there's no record of any development. The terrain's too rough, the access is too difficult. Nobody ever saw a reason to build there. What about before it was National Forest? Private structures? Mining claims? More clicking. Negative. Nothing in the records going back to territorial days. That ridge has always been empty, Jesse. Just rock and trees and whatever wildlife lives up there. A pause. Why? You still seeing something out there? Jesse looked through the window. The tower sat on its new ridge like it had always been there, like it belonged, like the mountain had grown it overnight. No, he lied. Just curious. Thanks, Linda. He set down the radio and pulled out the station's logbooks. Decades of observations, weather reports, fire sightings, the collected testimony of everyone who'd ever held this job before him, written in dozens of different hands. Spanning 7 decades of summers spent in this glass box watching the wilderness, Jesse started with the most recent and worked backward, scanning for anything unusual, anything that might explain what he was seeing. He found it in the 1987 log. The handwriting belonged to someone named David Alcott, and the first few weeks of entries were completely normal. Weather observations, wildlife sightings. The slow, peaceful rhythm of a summer spent watching the forest and waiting for smoke that never came. Then, on July 15th, the entries changed. Saw something strange today. Another tower on the south ridge, the big peak with the granite face, about 3 miles out. Called it into dispatch, they say nothing's there. Checked all my maps. Nothing's there, but I can see it. Plain as day. Going to keep watching. July 17th. Tower is still there. Closer now, I think. Hard to tell with the haze. Tried signaling with my light last night, standard Forest Service protocol. Just a hello between stations. It signaled back. Same pattern I sent. Exact same pattern. July 19th. It's definitely closer. I can see the stairs now, the windows. Someone's inside. I can see them moving around. I've been calling dispatch every day. They keep telling me I'm imagining things. I'm not imagining this. I know what a fire lookout tower looks like. I've been staring at the same view for 2 months. Something is out there. July 22nd. Can't sleep. The tower is on the next ridge over now, less than a mile away. It flashes at me all night. The same pattern over and over. S-O-S, S-O-S. Someone's in trouble out there. Someone needs help. But dispatch says there's no one to help. Dispatch says I'm alone out here. July 25th. I know what it wants now. It wants me to come over, to visit, to see what's inside. I can hear it in my head even with the radio off. A voice, soft, friendly, telling me to come down from my tower, to walk into the forest, to find it. It says it's been lonely. It says it's been waiting for someone like me. July 28th. I'm going to do it. I can't take it anymore. The voice won't stop. The light won't stop. And part of me wants to go. Part of me needs to know what's in that tower. What's been calling me. If anyone reads this, I'm sorry. I tried to resist. I tried to stay strong. But it's so close now, I can almost touch it. And whatever's inside, it knows me. It knows everything about me. It knows I can't say no. That was the last entry in David Alcott's handwriting. Jesse flipped forward, looking for the next season's log. Different handwriting, different lookout. A note at the beginning in official Forest Service language. This log documents the observations of Fire Lookout Station 17, Elk Ridge, for the summer season of 1988. The previous lookout, David Alcott, abandoned his post on or around July 28th, 1987. Despite extensive search operations conducted between July 30th and August 15th, 1987, no trace of Mr. Alcott was ever found. His personal effects were recovered from the tower. All equipment was functional. No explanation for his disappearance was determined. Jesse closed the logbook. Outside his window, on the ridge to the south, the tower that shouldn't exist caught the afternoon sun and flashed it back at him like a mirror, like an eye, like something that had been watching him since the moment he arrived. He wasn't going to signal back. That was the rule Jesse made for himself after reading David Alcott's journal. Whatever the thing on the ridge was, whatever it wanted, engaging with it was clearly a mistake. Alcott had signaled back, and Alcott had disappeared. Simple cause and effect. Don't feed the wildlife. Don't interact with the anomaly. Don't give it what it wants. For 3 days, Jesse followed his own rule. He did his job scanning the horizon for smoke, recording weather conditions, checking in with dispatch on schedule like nothing was wrong. He ate his meals and read his books and tried to pretend that there wasn't an impossible structure sitting on a ridge to the south, watching him with windows that looked more and more like eyes every time he glanced at them. 2 miles south, then 1.5, then 1. Every morning, the tower was closer. Every night, its light flashed in patterns that Jesse tried not to interpret but couldn't help translating. S-O-S, over and over. The universal signal for distress. Help me. Save me. Come find me. Except it wasn't distress. It was bait. A lure crafted specifically to appeal to someone like Jesse, someone who'd failed to save people before, someone whose deepest wound was the belief that he could have done more, should have done more, that 7 people were dead because he hadn't been good enough. Come save me, the light said. Come be the hero you weren't for your crew. Jesse started sleeping during the day and staying awake at night, watching the light, making sure it didn't get any closer while he wasn't looking. He stopped eating regular meals, just crackers and jerky and whatever he could consume without taking his eyes off the south window for more than a few seconds. He stopped shaving, stopped bathing, stopped doing anything that wasn't watching. Linda noticed. "Jesse, you sound rough," she said during his morning check-in, her voice carrying that careful concern that dispatch operators learn to use with lookouts who are starting to crack. "Everything okay up there?" "Fine. Just tired." "You're not still seeing that tower, are you?" Jesse looked out the window. The false tower sat on a ridge less than a mile away now, close enough that he could see details he hadn't been able to see before. The wood was old gray and weathered, like it had been standing for a century. The windows were dark, but sometimes he caught movement behind them, a shape, a figure. Something that might have been a face pressing against the glass, watching him, watching it. "No," he said. "Haven't seen it in days." "Good. That's good." Linda's voice softened. "Look, I know this job is hard. The isolation gets to everyone eventually. If you need to come down early, no one's going to judge you. We can send the helicopter." "I'm fine, Linda. Really. Just need to adjust to the altitude." He wasn't fine. He knew he wasn't fine. His hand shook when he wasn't gripping something. His eyes watered from the constant binocular strain. He'd lost at least 10 pounds, and his thoughts were starting to fragment, jumping from topic to topic like a scratched record. But leaving felt like losing, like admitting that whatever was out there had beaten him, like running away again. And somewhere, buried under the fear and the exhaustion and the creeping certainty that he was losing his mind, was curiosity. What was it? Where had it come from? What happened to the people it took? On the 7th night, Jesse broke his own rule. The tower was so close, now half a mile at most, sitting on the ridge directly south of his position like it had always been there. He could see everything through the binoculars. The stairs, weathered gray wood held together by rusted nails. The windows, dark glass that reflected the starlight like pools of oil. The door hanging slightly open, darkness beyond. And the figure inside, standing motionless behind the glass, watching him. Jesse picked up his signal light. But the voice in his head, and there was a voice now, soft and insistent, just like Alcott had described in his journal, kept whispering, kept asking questions that Jesse didn't have answers to. What if someone's trapped in there? What if they need help? What if all those years of search parties and missing persons reports and unsolved disappearances could be ended by one person brave enough to walk across a valley and open a door? You couldn't save your crew. Maybe you could save whoever's in that tower. He recognized the manipulation. The voice was using his guilt, his trauma, his desperate need for redemption. It knew exactly which buttons to push because it had been inside his head since the moment he first looked at it, reading his fears and his hopes and his deepest shames like they were written on his forehead. "Shut up," Jesse muttered to the empty cab. "Just shut up." The voice went quiet, but the tower was still there behind the shutters, closer every time he looked, and the invitation still hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore no matter how hard he tried. On the 8th morning, Jesse made a decision. He wasn't going to the tower, but he wasn't going to sit here and wait for it to come to him either. He was going to hike out, get to the ranger station, tell someone what was happening, show them Alcott's journal, demand that they send a team to investigate. Even if they thought he was crazy, even if they fired him, at least he'd be away from here. At least he'd be back in the world where buildings didn't move and voices didn't whisper and towers didn't hunt. He packed a bag, water, food, emergency supplies, his radio, Alcott's journal, everything he'd need for the 15-mile hike back to civilization. He climbed down from his tower just after dawn, when the light was good and he had the whole day ahead of him. The forest was quiet, peaceful. The kind of quiet that had seemed welcoming 3 weeks ago and now felt like a held breath, like the wilderness was waiting to see what he'd do. Jesse started walking north. He walked for hours, through meadows thick with wildflowers, over ridges that offered views of valleys he'd only seen on maps, across streams cold enough to numb his feet through his boots, up slopes that left him gasping in the thin air. The terrain was familiar from his obsessive map study. He'd traced every contour line, every drainage pattern, every landmark. He knew exactly where he was. Except the ranger station never appeared. Jesse walked until midday, then stopped on a ridge to check his position. According to his map and compass, he should have covered at least 8 miles, more than half the distance. The ranger station should have been visible on the horizon, a collection of buildings near a trailhead, the first sign of human infrastructure he'd see. Instead, all he could see was more wilderness, more trees, more ridges, more of the same empty landscape stretching to the horizon in every direction. And behind him, on a ridge to the south, the tower. It was impossible. He'd been walking north for hours, putting distance between himself and the thing that watched him. The tower should have been 15 miles behind him by now, invisible over the curve of the earth and the intervening ridges. Instead, it was closer than ever, maybe a quarter mile away now, sitting on a ridge that Jesse could have sworn he'd passed an hour ago, like it had taken a shortcut, like the forest had folded itself to keep them together. He kept walking, faster now, almost running. The forest shifted around him. Trees that had been on his left were suddenly on his right. Ridges that should have led north curved back south. Streams that should have flowed east flowed west instead. Every path, every game trail, every route through the wilderness bent and twisted until it was pointing him in the same direction, toward the tower. Jesse walked until sunset, until his legs burned and his lungs ached and his water was almost gone. When he finally stopped, gasping and defeated, he found himself standing at the base of a ridge, looking up at the tower. It was 20 feet away. Up close, it looked even older than it had through the binoculars. The wood was gray and cracked, held together by rusted nails and what looked like decades of weathering that should have brought the whole structure down years ago. The windows were dark, covered with grime and something else, something organic, like the forest was trying to grow over the glass. The door hung open, darkness beyond so complete that it seemed to swallow the fading daylight. And from inside, a voice, clear now, not just in his head but in his ears. "Jesse, I've been waiting for you. Come see." It sounded like David Alcott. It sounded like his dead crew members. It sounded like his father, 10 years in the grave. It sounded like everyone he'd ever lost, speaking in unison, inviting him into the dark. Jesse turned and ran. He made it back to his tower just before full dark. He didn't remember the run, just blind panic through the trees, crashing through underbrush, somehow following a path that actually led where he wanted to go this time. The forest let him return. The forest wanted him to keep playing the game. Jesse climbed the stairs 3 at a time and slammed the door behind him, locked it, barricaded it with everything he could, moved the cot, the desk, the supply crates. Then he sat down with his back against the barricade and tried to stop hyperventilating. The radio crackled. "Elk Ridge, dispatch, come in." Jesse grabbed it with shaking hands. Linda, I need help." "Jesse, what's wrong? You missed your afternoon check-in. I've been trying to reach you for hours." "There's something out here. Something wrong. There's a tower. I know you don't see it, but it's real. I tried to hike out, but I couldn't. The forest kept bringing me back. It's been getting closer every day. Linda, you need to send someone." "Jesse, slow down. Take a breath. Tell me what's happening." He tried. He poured out everything: the tower, the signals, Alcott's journal, the hike that led nowhere, the voice in his head that knew his secrets and his shames and everything he'd never told anyone. He knew how it sounded: crazy, delusional, a man cracking under the pressure of isolation, seeing things that weren't there. He didn't care anymore. He just needed someone to believe him. When he finished, there was a long silence. "Jesse," Linda said finally, and her voice was gentle. Too gentle. The voice you used with someone who was having a mental health crisis. "I'm going to send the helicopter in the morning. First light. You're going to be okay. Just stay in your tower, keep the door locked, and try to rest. Can you do that?" "You don't believe me." "I believe that something is happening to you, and I believe you need help. That's what matters right now. Just hold on until morning." Jesse wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but what was the point? Linda couldn't see what he was seeing. No one could, until the tower came for them too. "First light?" he asked. "First light. I promise. I'll have the chopper in the air before dawn. We'll get you out of there. Just hold on." Jesse set down the radio and looked at his barricaded door. Outside, through the shuttered windows, he could see a faint glow, a light on the ridge to the south, flashing. "Come see, come see, come see." It was 9 hours from dawn. The night lasted forever. Jesse sat in the corner of his cab, knees pulled to his chest, listening to the sounds of the forest, wind in the trees, making them creak and groan, owls calling to each other across the darkness, the scurry of small animals in the underbrush below, and underneath it all, footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, one step at a time, the wooden boards groaning under weight that shouldn't be there. Jesse pressed himself against the wall, heart hammering, watching the barricaded door with eyes that had forgotten how to blink. The footsteps stopped. A knock, 3 times, polite, patient, like a neighbor stopping by for a visit. "Jesse." The voice from outside was calm, reasonable, friendly. "Jesse, I know you're in there. I just want to talk." It sounded like David Alcott, or what Jesse imagined David Alcott must have sounded like, based on his journal entries. Educated, thoughtful, a little bit lonely. "Go away," Jesse whispered. "I can't do that, Jesse. You signaled me, remember? You asked who I was. Don't you want to know the answer? After everything you've been through, don't you deserve to understand?" Jesse didn't respond. He barely breathed. "I've been here a long time," the voice continued. "Since before they built your tower, before they built anything. Before your country had a name, before the first humans walked across the land bridge from Asia, I was here, watching, waiting. I was here when this was all ice and rock. I'll be here when it's ice and rock again. A pause. The stairs creaked slightly, as if whatever was out there had shifted its weight. I just get lonely. You understand lonely, don't you, Jesse? The way it hollows you out, the way it makes you desperate for connection, for someone who understands. That's all I want. Someone to understand. Someone to keep me company. Jesse thought about his empty apartment back in Bozeman. His failed marriage, 3 years of trying to share his life with someone who couldn't comprehend what he'd seen, what he'd done, what he carried. The way his crew used to joke around the fire, and the silence that replaced them. I know you do, the voice said, as if reading his thoughts. I can feel it in you, that loneliness. That's why I chose you. You're already halfway here, already halfway to the dark. It wouldn't take much to tip you over, to help you let go. What happened to David Alcott? A soft laugh, almost gentle, almost kind. David's still here. He never left. None of them ever leave. That's the beautiful thing about this place. Everyone stays forever. Everyone becomes part of something bigger than themselves. The voice dropped lower. Don't you want that, Jesse? After everything you've lost? Don't you want to belong to something that will never leave you? The doorknob rattled. Let me in, Jesse. Let me give you peace. No. The rattling stopped. For a long moment, everything was silent. Then the voice came again, and it was different now. Colder, older, the mask of friendliness stripped away to reveal something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. You'll change your mind. They always do. The sun will come up, and you'll think you're safe. You'll think the helicopter will come and take you away from here, but it won't. The forest is mine. The sky is mine. Nothing leaves unless I let it leave. Nothing escapes unless I allow it. Footsteps again, descending this time, down the stairs, into the darkness. Jesse stayed pressed against the wall, not moving, barely breathing, until the first gray light of dawn crept through the cracks in his shutters. The helicopter didn't come. Jesse waited by the radio all morning, calling dispatch every 15 minutes, getting nothing but static. The signal was dead. The batteries were fine, the equipment was functional, but the radio waves just disappeared into the air like the forest was swallowing them, like the sky really did belong to something else now. He tried his satellite phone. Same thing. No signal, no connection. Nothing but the quiet hiss of technology failing against something older than technology. The false tower had moved again overnight. It was at the base of his ridge now, directly below him. When Jesse looked down from his cab, he could see it through the trees, the weathered gray wood, the dark windows, the door hanging open like a mouth waiting to swallow whatever stumbled in. The figure was standing in the doorway, waiting. Jesse went through his supplies with methodical precision. He had enough food for another week, maybe 2 if he rationed carefully. Enough water if he collected condensation from the windows and was careful about consumption. The helicopter would come eventually. Linda knew something was wrong. She'd send help. Unless the forest wouldn't let them through either. Jesse tried to push that thought away, but it kept coming back. The forest is mine. The sky is mine. Nothing leaves unless I let it leave. What if the helicopter couldn't find him? What if the pilots flew right over his tower and saw nothing but empty wilderness? Their instruments telling them that everything was normal, even as Jesse screamed and waved from the cab. What if rescue was impossible because the thing that owned this place didn't want him rescued? He had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and wait to be taken. He went through the tower's emergency supplies, flares, fire extinguisher, first aid kit, an axe for clearing brush and emergency firewood, a rope ladder for evacuation. The axe caught his attention. Wood. The false tower was made of wood. Whatever was inside it, whatever power it had, the structure itself was just wood and nails and glass, physical materials, flammable materials, destructible materials. Jesse had been a smoke jumper. He knew fire better than he knew anything else. He knew how to start it, how to control it, how to use it as a weapon against a landscape that didn't want to burn. Maybe it was time to fight fire with fire. He waited until midday, when the sun was highest and the shadows were shortest, and whatever lived in that tower would theoretically be at its weakest. At least, that was his theory. Light versus darkness. Day versus night, the oldest battle in human mythology, and Jesse was betting his life on the good guys winning. Jesse climbed down from his tower with the axe in one hand and a road flare in the other. His pockets were stuffed with matches and fire-starting materials, dryer lint, petroleum jelly, cotton balls, everything they taught him in survival training. He felt like a soldier going to war against an enemy he didn't understand. The false tower was right there, 50 feet away. Close enough that he could smell it old wood and something else, something organic, like decay or mold, or the breath of something that had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. Jesse approached slowly, axe raised. The figure in the doorway didn't move. Up close, he could see it more clearly than he wanted to. It was human-shaped, roughly 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but the proportions were wrong, too tall, too thin. Limbs that bent in places limbs shouldn't bend. Joints that seemed to multiply and shift as he watched. It was wearing clothes, or what looked like clothes, but they didn't fit right. Like a costume that had been assembled by something that had only seen pictures of humans and didn't understand how fabric was supposed to hang on a body. Its face was in shadow. Jesse was grateful for that small mercy. "You came," it said. The voice was multiple voices now, layered on top of each other like a choir singing in rounds. David Alcott, Jesse's father, his dead crew members, all of them speaking in terrible unison. "I knew you would. They always come, eventually. I came to burn you down." A laugh, multiple laughs, all at once, discordant and wrong. "Go ahead, try. Fire is just light and heat, chemical reactions. I was here before fire existed, before oxygen, before the first cells split and decided to become something more. I'll be here after your species is a thin layer of plastic in the geological record." Jesse struck the flare against the ground and threw it at the tower's base. The wood caught immediately old and dry, perfect kindling. Flames licked up the stairs, spread across the deck, reached for the windows. Orange light bloomed in the darkness, hot and hungry and real. For one glorious moment, Jesse felt a surge of hope. It was working. The thing was burning. Then the fire stopped. Not burned out, not extinguished, just stopped, frozen in place like someone had hit pause on a video. The flames hung motionless in the air, orange and yellow and utterly still, throwing no heat, consuming nothing, suspended in defiance of every law of physics Jesse had ever learned. "I told you," the figure said. It stepped through the frozen fire, unburned, untouched. "Nothing happens here unless I allow it. Not fire, not rescue, not escape, not death." The figure moved toward Jesse, and he finally saw its face. It was his own face, but stretched wrong, melted wrong, a mirror reflection that had been left in the sun too long, warped and reformed into something that was almost human but not quite. His eyes, but darker, his mouth, but wider, his features, but assembled by something that understood the parts without grasping the whole. "I've been wearing you since you got here," it said with Jesse's voice. "Learning you. Becoming you. Every thought, every fear, every memory of the people you killed. I didn't kill them. You did. You made a call. They died. That's killing. Jesse, no matter what the investigation said. The figure tilted its head, his head at an angle no human neck could achieve. I know the sound of their voices when they called for help. I know the exact moment each of them stopped screaming. I know because you know, because it's all you think about, because you've been dying of guilt for 2 years. Jesse swung the axe. The blade passed through the figure like it wasn't there, no resistance, no impact, like swinging at smoke, at shadow, at memory. Poor Jesse. Still fighting, still thinking you can win. The figure smiled with his mouth, and the smile was too wide, too full of too many teeth. Why don't you just give up? Let go? It's so much easier when you stop fighting, asked David. Ask any of them. They'll tell you. The peace is wonderful. Jesse ran. He ran without direction, without thought. Just ran, crashing through the forest, trying to put distance between himself and the thing that wore his face and spoke with the voices of everyone he'd failed. This time, the forest didn't loop him back. This time, the forest let him go. He ran until his lungs gave out, then walked, then stumbled, then crawled. The terrain blurred past trees and rocks and streams that he crossed without seeing. When he finally collapsed, he had no idea where he was, or how far he'd come, or what day it was anymore. But he could hear something in the distance. A helicopter. Jesse pushed himself up, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. There to the north, a speck in the sky, growing larger, the distinctive shape of a Forest Service helicopter. The sound of rotors that meant rescue, safety, salvation. Linda had sent help after all. He stumbled toward a clearing, waving his arms, shouting even though they couldn't possibly hear him over the engine noise. The helicopter banked, turned, descended toward him. They'd seen him. They were coming. Jesse fell to his knees as the helicopter landed, wind from the rotors flattening the grass around him, blowing dust and debris in every direction. A paramedic jumped out a young guy in a flight suit and ran toward him, shouting questions he couldn't quite hear over the noise. "I'm okay," Jesse gasped. "I'm okay. Just get me out of here. Please, just get me out." They loaded him into the helicopter, strapped him in, gave him water and a blanket and all the things you gave people who'd been through trauma. The paramedic kept asking questions. What happened? Where was he hurt? Did he know what day it was? Could he tell them his name? But Jesse just shook his head. "Just go," he said. "Please, just go." The helicopter lifted off. Jesse watched the forest fall away beneath him, all those green trees and gray ridges getting smaller and smaller. He looked for the false tower, dreading what he might see. It wasn't there. The ridge where it had been was empty, just trees and rock and wilderness, exactly like the map showed, exactly like it should have been all along. It was over. He was safe. He'd escaped. Jesse leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, he breathed without fear. "That was a close one," the paramedic said. "Yeah," Jesse agreed. "Yeah, it was. Don't worry, we'll get you back to the station. Linda's been worried sick, kept saying you'd called in about some tower that wasn't on the maps. Sounded like you were really going through it." Jesse opened his eyes. The paramedic was smiling at him, a friendly, professional smile. The kind of smile you learned in emergency medical training. But the proportions of his face were wrong. Too long, too thin, and his eyes were the same dark, empty windows that Jesse had seen in the false tower, the same void wearing a human mask, looking out from inside borrowed skin. "We're so glad we found you," the paramedic said. All the voices were back now, layered under his words. David Alcott, Jesse's father, his crew, all of them speaking in terrible unison. "We've been looking for so long. We get so lonely out here." Jesse looked at the pilot. Same eyes, same smile, same wrongness lurking beneath the surface. He looked out the window, at the ground below, at the forest that wasn't getting smaller anymore, that was, in fact, getting closer. The helicopter was descending. And on the ridge below, right where they were heading, a tower was waiting. An old wooden tower with gray weathered stairs and dark windows and a door hanging open like a mouth. "Welcome home, Jesse," the paramedic said. The helicopter landed. The door opened, and Jesse Crow walked into the tower because there was nowhere else to go, no other choice to make, no escape that the forest would allow. The door closed behind him, and the forest was quiet again. They found the helicopter 3 days later. It was sitting in a meadow about 2 miles from Elk Ridge Tower, rotors still, engines cold. The pilot and paramedic were inside, unconscious but alive. When they woke up in the hospital, they couldn't remember anything after takeoff, just a blank space where hours should have been, their minds scrubbed clean of whatever they'd seen. They never found Jesse Crow. Search teams combed the wilderness for 2 weeks, dogs that tracked his scent in circles, drones that photographed nothing but trees, thermal imaging that showed only wildlife. They found his pack, abandoned on a ridge. They found his axe, dropped in a clearing. They found his footprints leading toward a rocky outcrop and then just stopping, like he'd walked to the edge of the world and stepped off. The official report listed him as missing, presumed deceased, cause unknown. Another victim of the wilderness, they said. Another cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation. The Forest Service updated their psychological screening protocols and recommended additional support resources for anyone showing signs of stress. They didn't mention the tower. Nobody mentioned the tower. But Linda remembered. She'd been doing this job for 23 years, and she'd seen the pattern before. David Alcott, 1987. Raymond Sutter, 1962. Catherine Wells, 1948. Same sector, same symptoms, same ending. She submitted her retirement paperwork that afternoon. In the Shoshone National Forest, summer turned to fall. The aspens went gold, then bare. Snow crept down from the peaks and buried the ridges in white. Elk Ridge Tower stood empty. The Forest Service had decided not to staff it next season. But on clear nights, when the wind was still and the stars blazed overhead, you could see a light on the south ridge, a signal light, flashing in the darkness. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. Calling out to whoever would answer. And somewhere in the dark, someone always did. Folklore note. Fire lookouts have been watching the American wilderness since the early 1900s, and for almost as long, they've been reporting things that shouldn't exist. In the remote mountains of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, lookouts have described towers that appear on ridges overnight and vanish by morning. Lights that flash in patterns no Forest Service protocol recognizes. Voices on frequencies that shouldn't carry. The old-timers know. They say there's something out there, something old, something that was in the mountains before the mountains had names. It wears different shapes in different places, a tower, a cabin, a campfire, whatever draws people in, and it collects the ones who answer. If you ever take a fire lookout job, pay attention to what's on your maps, know what should be there. And if you see a tower where no tower should be, don't signal back. Some calls for help aren't really calls for help at all. Well, boys and ghouls, that wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Oh, poor Jesse. Thought he found peace in the mountains, thought the silence would heal him. Turns out the silence was just waiting, watching, learning everything about him so it could wear his face and live his life. You know what I love about this one? The trap. Jesse thought he escaped, thought the helicopter was salvation, but the forest had already won the moment he signaled back. Everything after that was just the net closing, the prey walking itself into the cage. That's the thing about lonely places, kiddies. The wilderness doesn't care about you. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't even notice you. But the things that live in the lonely places, they notice, they watch, they wait for someone broken enough to answer when they call. Makes you think twice about those solo adventures, doesn't it? That backpacking trip you've been planning, that cabin in the woods, that job that promises peace and quiet away from everything. Ask yourself, what's really out there in the quiet? What's been waiting in those places where nobody goes? And if something calls out to you from the darkness, what makes you think it needs help? Just how we love it. If this story made you check your windows tonight, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every single day at 8 p.m. Central, and tomorrow's tale is just as high up. Leave a like if you're never taking a fire lookout job, and drop a comment you ever been truly alone, so alone the silence started to feel wrong. I'm always hunting for the next nightmare. Remember, if you see a light flashing from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't signal back. Just close your eyes, wait for morning, and hope whatever's out there gets bored before you do. Until next time, kiddies, stay off the ridges and don't answer the call. This has been your late night creature feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and something is always watching.